I'm going to try to sit down. But I'm going to be tempted to stand up, because I like to stand up. Alright, so this talk tonight is on BackboneJS, and... Okay, so... First of all, the invite said on the farm, and my goal was to make this a farm-themed presentation. But I don't know why I wanted to do that. So effectively, this talk is now called Off the Farm. Because it's not necessarily farm-themed. There are some animals in this talk, but there also are no pictures in this talk, which I'm very proud of. There's a lot of slides I have to get through, and I'm not really in any rush to get through all these, because I know I'm not going to get through all the content in Backbone, so I want to make this like very loose. There's a lot of code examples. If you guys want to break through anything and just go in, drill in, and check out more things, just shout out, and we'll go and we'll look at it and check it out. And this presentation is structured and very ground up, like kind of how I approach Backbone and learning it. I've never built an application in Backbone. I only started really seriously looking at it to prepare for this presentation. So at the end of this, I think you guys will have good foundation of how Backbone works. I'm not here to wow you about Backbone being like a really awesome thing. There's plenty of sites out there to go look at to experience the awesomeness. But I think that you will come out of here just understanding the bits and pieces. Without further ado, I'm going to take you to slide number 2. Alright, so what's the deal? BackboneJS it's just a JavaScript library written by this fellow who I cannot pronounce his name. I'll just call him Jeremy. And Jeremy has written a lot of other cool libraries and applications and things like that. One of them is CoffeeScript. And now, the deal with Backbone is that when you're writing very rich applications on the client side, you often end up with a tangled mess of jQuery, callbacks, attaching things to DOM nodes here and there. And for little things, it's okay. And that may be really what you just want to do. But when you want to do really rich things, you really need more structure. And that's what Backbone is all about. It's about structuring your application. And I'm not here to tell you that Backbone is MVC, because I don't care. I don't care if it's MVVM, and I don't care. Backbone is just going to give you structure. And we're going to go through what that structure is. Backbone has like 3 core concepts I want you to think about. It just has a model, it has views, and it has a router. Pretty simple at a high level. Now, dependencies to use Backbone, we need to include _JS, which is another library written by this fellow Jeremy. Now, if we want to use the sort of if we want to connect out with the server, which most applications will, but we'll talk about the applications that we won't want to do that. But really, none of this really matters so much, because we'll just include the libraries we want. But no big deal. But we want JSON too, and we want to include jQuery, or it seems to work well with this Zepto. And this is for some DOM manipulation. We'll see when we get into the views how there are some loose dependencies on these libraries. So, the first thing we want to look at are Backbone events. Backbone events provide ability for objects to bind and trigger custom named events. Events do not have to be declared before they are bound. Events may take past arguments. Alright, so let's check this out. There's 3 things about events. There's extend, bind, and trigger. Alright, so here we have a cow. A cow is just an object. We're going to use something in underscore When you see this under here, it's much like jQuery, but this is not jQuery or any other library that might use a nice little shortcut sort of syntax token like this. This is the underscore library. And we're going to use a feature of the underscore library here called extend. And we're going to extend our cow object to have the features of Backbone events. And this line here, we are going to take a cow and we're going to bind it to a jump event. And when the jump event is triggered, we are going to log a message, I just jumped, with our message. And here we are going to go ahead and trigger on the cow jump over the moon. And let's run this code. I jumped over the moon. Yay.
What does trigger mean?
Okay, trigger is the act of triggering the event. So we have some object has these eventing capabilities. So trigger just says cow is eventing capability. I'm going to head and it's like publishing. It's like publishing an event. Think of trigger and publish as the same thing. Trigger just says go ahead, bam, do this, jump over the moon.
It'd be like the event method in node.js is event method.
We cool? So, all knowing. What is all? All is a special token that when you bind to all, you are going to get every single thing. Every single event that's triggered, your all handler is going to know about it. So here, this is just what we did last time. We got a cow, we extend it with events. Here, we're going to bind the jump event with a function. So anytime jump, I want to do this. I want to say, I just jumped. But now we get this all. So I'm not going to trigger an all, but the framework is just going to say, hey, anytime any event happens, execute this code, this callback. So here again, just like last time, I'm going to trigger jump. And I'm going to say cow jumps over the moon. And up here we can see I just jumped over the moon, and the all here knew about it. I know what you did. Pretty fancy stuff. Okay, so Backbone has this event naming convention that it likes to use. And you may see this in the slides, but this is just something you might like to know about. We just delimit our events with colons. We will see this, sorry. So especially this change.name, which is something to notice when you see that. So, providing context with events. This. Alright, this is bad. So, coming up here is a common problem. This is nothing specific with events. I just threw it in here to show you that the events take an additional parameter of context. And we'll just walk through a typical example that all libraries have this issue. This is a JavaScript issue with this. So, here we have moon. And let me just say that this is kind of just, we're building up the backbone. This is something that you have to know. This is a prerequisite to Backbone here, okay? So, moon, I'm creating a moon function, a function constructor here, okay? So, over here, I'm going to say, I'm giving the moon, I'm saying that it's capable of Backbone events right here. So now my moon knows how to do all these event things. Now I got a cow. So now down here, I'm creating an instance of cow and moon, and I'm binding cow's jump function to the moon's distracted event. So whenever the moon gets distracted, I want the cow to jump. So right here, I'm going to distract the moon. Okay? But there's a problem here. Let's run it. Ah, man, jump is undefined. So right here, jump, this dot target right here, this is undefined because this, see, the target is supposed to be over the moon. But now, the context that this code is running in, it doesn't know the instance of cow anymore. This is not the cow that I want it to be. So I need to fix this. This is just JavaScript thing, but I'm just showing here that that the eventing lets you fix this. This is good. And the way we fix this is we just pass our cow instance into our bind function here. And now when I call jump over the moon, I get over the moon. So this is kind of a hairier little piece of code, but it's kind of typical JavaScript stuff. And I don't know, I'm debating putting this in here, but this is the typical eventing stuff that Backbone works with. So it's in every piece of Backbone. This is what it uses. So
Question about that.
yeah.
So that fixed it for the distracted method, but you still have the issue if you decide to call jump directly on the cow, right? I guess I guess what I'm used to seeing in that context is maybe after this dot target equals over the moon, you would say something like var that equals this, and then you'd say that dot target instead, and that would fix the problem for all cases, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So your bind thing there is for a very specific use.
Yeah, it's kind of a short-sighted piece of code that's kind of, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very contrived for this method call. So I should probably take this slide out. But I'm just trying to illustrate that the bind takes a context.
Yeah, right.
So we have unbind, and so unbind we can remove a specific callback. We can remove by a specific event name, or we can remove all callbacks. So here, we can trigger with, this just shows triggering with specific arguments. So write down I'm jumping, and I can pass additional arguments to my trigger. And then my function that my callback can get those if it wants them. Okay, so that's out of the way. That's Backbone model, and just the really thing is just the thing we need to know is that there's something inside all of these objects that is capable of eventing. So this is the Backbone model. This is the essence of your application on the client side. You put your data and your logic in here. And a big thing about this is that it supports state synchronization, which we'll see later. Synchronizing it to a server, or synchronizing it to local storage, or synchronizing it with WebSockets to wherever you want to go. So here's what you could do to create a simple model. You would say BackboneModel.extend. There's an even simpler way to do it than this. You don't even have to extend it. You could just do a straight up model. But for now, we'll just go with this. Later, I'll point out where the simpler case is. So here, we're just creating, this is essentially like saying, I'm creating a pig, and it's kind of like my prototype for future pig instances, okay? And now, when I extend, I have the option of setting an initialization function. So right here, when I create a new instance of a pig, you can see my initialization function ran. Oink, oink. So that'll run every time you're, you don't have to provide an initialization function, but you can. Attributes. Every model can have 0 or many attributes. here's a case where I'm taking a pig and I'm going to create a new pig and pass it a name and an age. And you can keep on and you can create as many attributes as you want here. Name and value, name and value. So, after you create your pig, you pull out an attribute with get. I can say pick get.name, or there's an escape function, which will HTML escape them, which will help for prevent cross-site scripting type things. So I run this code. The first one says hi because I just ran a get on it, and obviously the script tag got by that. So after that, the next log call that was escaped, so it didn't execute.
So why did get do an eval in the code? Is that what happened there?
Excuse me?
It seems like something did an eval on that string. What did an eval on that string to run the alert?
Okay, so it was the get, it was the log call. So the log call essentially put that string into the DOM.
Okay.
So we can set attributes, create a pig, and here we can see, right here, I am getting a pig, or I am getting the pig's name, and I'm logging that. Then right here I set the pig's name from Wilbur to Jeff, and then I'll log the name, so we should see a difference. And there's our difference. It was Wilbur, now it's Jeff.
If you try and set on an attribute that you haven't set up previously, like in the new call, right, where you set new and you gave a name and age, if you had tried to say pig.set something else, would it have complained or would it have just done?
It'd be fine. You can do that. Okay, attribute existence. Here's a pig. It's got a name Wilbur. Now, does it have a name? Yes, it does have a name. And does it have the attribute color? So we should see true and false. And there's our true and false. Can we remove an attribute? So we have a name, a new pig, and we have it should have a name, and unsetting. Unset should totally remove that attribute from the object. And then we'll check to see if it has it after we removed it. So it's gone after we removed it. Here we can remove all the attributes with the clear function. So we have a name and an age. So we should see we have them, and then after we clear it, we shouldn't have them.
Does that only clear out own properties? I mean, stuff that's farther up the prototype chain is leave in place?
It doesn't even look, I haven't looked at the source, but I'm assuming it doesn't look at the prototype chain unless it's looking at the prototype chain for other attributes that you've inherited from another backbone model. Now, I don't cover inheritance, but you can inherit from a backbone model, one from another.
Can you pass clear anything? Like if you only wanted to get rid of age, wanted to keep name, could you do that?
Well, you could unset a specific attribute. Now, I don't remember seeing that you could clear. Let me check. Collection and clear. So clear options removes all attributes unless silent. No, you can't. So default attributes. Okay, so what if I want to set up a name and an age for every instance, but I don't want to provide them when I construct them? I can do that with defaults. I specify defaults hash when I extend a model. And now every time I create a new pig, I will start out with a don't know and an age of -1. So here I create a pig with an age of 22, and its name should be don't know. And you see its age is don't know. Cloning. You can actually do some cloning on pigs. I would not eat them, but you can clone them. Here we'll take our pig. We have Sam, and we're going to clone him as Bill. And so after we clone him, we're going to get his name. We're going to get Bill's name here, and then we're going to set Bill's name to Bill because his name was Sam. And then we're going to get both of the names. This is pretty unimpressive stuff.
Is Sam still Sam?
What's that?
Sam is still Sam.
Yeah, Sam is still Sam. Is there a problem on this one?
No.
No, okay. So, of course, you want to put your logic in your model. So, because this is the essence of your application. Let's put our logic in here. So here is a really bad example of logic. Okay. So, my backbone model, I got a pig. And my pig likes to eat. So he has meals in his belly. He starts out with 0 meals in his belly. And so his belly, I have a function that checks if his belly is full. If his belly is full if he's got more than 2 meals. And I can feed my pig. And if his belly is full, he's going to puke. Okay? And so...
Does that empty his stomach then to 0 meals?
Yeah, I did think about that. But the thing is, the part of the problem here is that I can only get so many lines of code on the slide. Okay, so here is my pig, and I'm gonna. This is so it does nothing because it's I couldn't get an event handler on this slide, so. The idea here is your logic goes in here and you trigger events around your logic. And we'll see later on that your views listen for these events and they update themselves around this logic. So you got your data and your logic all in here. Validation. All right. Validate method exists in each model. How am I doing on time? Awesome. Validate method is on each model. It is called before each set and save operation. And I have not talked about the save operation yet, and I'm deferring that until a later slide. Because I don't think you guys are ready for that.
Cloning pigs we can handle saving.
It's tough.
Save the name.
Very hard. Save accepts. Validation accepts attributes to be updated. So, none of this will make sense probably until I just show you the code. So, if valid, your validation method is structured like this. You have a validate method. Inside of that validate method, you check the properties passed into it that are changing. If they look valid to you, you don't do anything. If they look bad to you, you return an error message. Or you can return custom error object. And no matter what object you return, if the calling code sees, if the backbone framework sees that something was returned, it says that's an error. Something is an error. Nothing is not an error. Okay, so if the validate returns something, the set or save will not proceed. In addition, the error event will be triggered. So that's something that your view can listen for when we get to that. Let's see an example. Here's my old trusty pig. Now my pig is getting old. So, but my pig cannot be more than 100 years old because he doesn't think that he should be that old. So I'm going to validate that my pig can never be more than 100 years old. So this is my validation function. Right here, I've got I create a new pig of age 2. Then here I'm going to bind an error to the error event, and that callback accepts the model and the error. And I'm going to go ahead and set the age of the pig to 191 years old. And after that, I'm going to get the age back and see if it changed. So here, it shows I tried to set the age to 191. That came from our validate. The validator returned, hey man, I'm not that old. And at the end of the day, the pig's still 2. Change events. The set attribute triggers a change event. And the change events also are triggered for specific attributes. Okay, what I... Yeah.
Being old school, because I'm old and school was when you're, I know with all the event-driven stuff, and you have logic that you're doing in a sequential mode, and when you start doing event/exception handling type processing, is there, and this may be my lack of understanding, but is there something analogous to the try-catch? So in the event that you are trying to do some sequential processing and something bad happens, that you can kind of continue your flow, or what's, maybe there's another...
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're are you saying that like in my validate, like what if something goes wrong?
Yeah, so let's say you've got, 20 lines of code, pig set, and, a bunch of other stuff that you want to have happen. So it's fine to throw that event out there, but I want to know where do I pick up doing whatever else I need to do.
Well, the validation issue is something that it's a business logic validation, so it should be something you're planning for. So you should be able to, it's something that, it's almost like the API in a way. Like you should know that you should be binding to that error event. So
then in that log statement, since the pig set throws the error, then my processing does continue on right after that. I had that little flare of an event come off. But if I then want to alter my course after that.
Yeah, I think that there's confusion because of the name of this event, error. It's not error as in like exceptional, as in I can't recover from some sort of runtime error. It's errors and
I know this is a whole different paradigm, so I may be just kind of listening to it.
There is a difference there. Like if you had several sets and a couple other things in a row, and some of them were kind of semi-dependent upon success or presuming success of each step before. I mean, this is different than like the frequent node callback pattern where you have either an error object or your results passed. Basically, both of them are parameters.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to fix the issue of uncaught exceptions. I mean, I think if you really have to catch exceptions, you're still going to have to embed some try-catch somewhere. I'm not under the impression that solves that problem for you.
Yeah, absolutely not. This error is just saying specifically a business rule failed validation.
So what would happen if you wanted to do 5 sets in a row, and you put those inside a try, and in your bind for error, instead of logging it, you did a throw? Would that work then, so that only the successful sets would pass, and as soon as one failed, it would bail out and go to the catch? Because that threw an exception, the bind for error?
So there still is a, I am kind of a neophyte in that area, but so there is a try
Yeah,
catch structure that you can.
yeah, I think that does what he's wanting.
Okay. all right.
Yeah, like if this was like a real production app, you could totally have a try catch in here, and you could throw some other different event that
Okay,
trigger a different
that's-
event that was specifically
Okay,
for your
that's-
case.
That's-
That was, the error is very it's very confused, it's sort of an overridden event.
We're just trying to find out if the set was successful or not. Say returns true or false to let you know whether it was successful.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So if there is an error, set returns false.
So otherwise, that would be the difference from the callback. Typical callback pattern is finding the error event tells you if it didn't succeed, but nothing otherwise would have told you that it did succeed. So you couldn't, outside of that finding the error, you couldn't make decisions about whether you should proceed somewhere.
So every time an attribute change, there's a specific change event for that attribute. In addition, there's a generic change event that fires over for the whole model. When you're changing events, you can suppress the changing, you can suppress eventing. If you're going to call a change on this attribute or this attribute, you can suppress it all by passing silent true, and then no change events will get fired. Sometimes we'll see that this pattern will work well when you're when you're changing things over iterations or iterators. So let's see a change event. Here I have a chicken, and I create a new chick, and its status is sleeping. And then I bind to a change event, and when the change happens, I'm going to log that a change happened. In addition, there's another event I can bind to, and this is where that namespacing happens, a namespace with a colon here. And this is not me making up an event name. This is underscore with this event name. It says whatever your status, whatever your attribute name was, it creates an event name with change, colon, your attribute name. So now I can bind to that event name. So when I come down here and I set my status to tweeting, I have two logs happening. One for the overall change event and one for the specific model change event, or the specific attributes change event. So here's another example, and this is just silent. Setting silent to true, I should not get change events here. No change event. It's the same code as last time, but I'm just setting silent. Now, what I can do, this is when you set silent to true, there is a function called change. And when you call change, it manually triggers the events to happen. So you can create like these units of work, and then bam, call change, and bam, all those events and all the validations are going to happen when you call that change.
Oh, so that'd be like the commit. So then you could do a one-time validation, a consistency check on the state of your object at that time.
Exactly. Identity. Models come with an ID property. It's an arbitrary string that could be an integer or a GUID or anything. when you set an attribute named ID, it automatically gets copied into your model's property named ID. A model has something called the client ID. And it's a unique identifier automatically assigned to all models when first created. So this is helpful. They take the form of these, C1, C2, C3. This is helpful when you're working in a case where you don't have an ID, like identity columns in databases. You don't know. You're creating a new instance of a cart item or something. And so Backbone is going to create an ID for you. Change tracking. So there's some functions in model, I'm just going to mention them, and they allow you to kind of determine, do diffs on your model. So has changed determines what attributes has changed since the last change event. Previous gets the previous value of a change attribute. Change attributes gets attributes that have changed. And previous attributes gets the previous attributes. Now, some of these only really work in the context of a change event. Okay, so that is models. That was kind of a detailed look at models. There's a few things that I didn't mention yet. But those are the pieces to building up a model. Any questions on model? All right, so this is the collection. So collections are still in the I talk about Backbone.Model, but taking up a level of its abstraction, there's just the general idea of a model where you're building up business logic. And that Backbone.Collection fits into this idea of the model. You know, you can put your business logic in the Backbone.Collection. So Backbone collections are ordered sets of models. And sets is important. It is a set. It's not a list, it's a set. So we have trigger, we have add and remove events on our collections. We can trigger any triggerable event on our model. So if our model has a puke event, we can trigger a puke event from our collection. That is very, very convenient. Actually, this is worded very, this is not worded good. Let's say it this way. If we have a collection of pigs and they're able to trigger puke events, somebody can, instead of having to bind to each pig, somebody can simply bind to our collection for the puke event. And that way, if one of our pigs triggers the puke, we can just bind once to the collection and we'll get any of those. So they'll all bubble up through our collection. So, the very, very cool thing is all of our collections are iterable via _JS. So _JS probably deserves a whole, could have many talks. I mean, really awesome library. And it is written by this fellow named Jeremy. Okay. So, like I said, sets. These are built up of sets, which is like normally like creating an app on a server and like we just load up a list of like orders or something, and it doesn't, order items are, like usually we don't usually when we build this out, and I build this out, usually the data structure is not necessarily a set. It's usually a list, and most times things are unique. It's hard to say on the problem, but it's just interesting that it shows them to represent these as sets. Just have to think about that one. I guess it makes sense. But anyway, so here's an example showing how this is truly a set, I think, if I can remember. All right, so we got a duck. And then we're creating a new collection. And so to create a collection, we could just say new backbone.collection. And up here, to create a duck, I actually could have said new backbone.model. It was when I came here that I figured that out. Went to this slide. Okay, so now I'm going to create Donald, and I am going to say he's a new duck, and his name is Donald. And this is just a helper function called add, and it's just going to do a bunch of junk. It's going to try to add him to the collection and log it. Don't worry too much about that. Just know that it adds to the collection and logs it to the screen. So here I'm going to try to add a name, Donald, and then what's this one? Oh yeah. Okay, so this is just something to print on the screen to identify this function call. That's one. Then I'm going to try to add another duck named Donald, and I'm going to see if it'll let me do that. Then I'm going to add this Donald instance, and then I'm going to try to add this Donald instance again, and I'm going to see if any of this fails. Okay, so here I got to 1, 2, and 3, and then my logging is jacked up, but I failed right here on the fourth one. The fourth one failed. So what happened here is on my first add, I added name Donald, and I added name Donald 2, or I added the second name Donald. When I added these, it saw these as two separate instances. Each add created a new client ID. Okay, every time the new instance is created, remember a new client ID is generated, and Backbone uses client ID to determine identity. So right here, because I used the same instance, client ID was the same on these. And so the second one is said, nope, I don't think so, dude. And so it failed. So just showing that it's a set. So let's add something to a model here. Let's add a collection, or a model, or add a model to a collection. Here I got a duck, again, a collection. And then a model has an add event. I'm going to bind to the add event, and I'm going to log duck added. Right down here, I got my collection. I'm going to add new duck. So right here, I can add an array of ducks, or I can add a single duck if I want. Right here, I didn't need to put this in an array. I could have just said new duck, but I just wanted to put it in an array because I just did. So now I'm going to log the length of the collection. It's 1. Isn't that cool? So let's remove a model from a collection. It's the same setup as before, but this time I'm binding to the remove event, and I'm going to add it, and I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to check the length. The length is 0. It was removed. So this is going to show how a model event gets triggered or bubbled up through the collection. So setup here, duck is age 1. So I'm going to add a duck to the collection right here. And right here, I'm going to say that a duck has, I know that a model will fire a change event, or trigger a change event when it gets changed. So I'm going to give it a callback, and I'm going to log that change event. But I'm not binding the callback to the duck, I'm binding it to the collection. And to the duck, I'm going to set the age to 2. Alright, so it was fired. And then up here in the header, you can see the ID was C48, which is interesting that it was 48, not like C1 or something. So there must be some tracking going on to figure out, how many I've created thus far. This is my presentation. add event. What's the purpose of this slide? I don't know, let's run it. Wow. Okay, let's get a model by ID. So, model, the collection has a function called get. And get gets the model by the ID, not the client ID, the ID. And these IDs should be the ID that you identify your model with on the server. Or if you don't have a server, you don't care. It's just the ID. So I'm setting an ID to 1, 1, 2, 2. And here I'm going to call get on 2. And I'm going to say that's my found one. And I'm going to show its name. And I found it. And its name was 2. And that's the one I want because I call get on 2. So let's do get model by client ID, which is another function. And in here, I'm going to create a collection, a backbone collection, and I'm going to add the same data that I added before, and I'm going to use a helper function called at. And at just gets the item in that collection at the index. They're zero based. So it should get me the second item. Now, then why did I label this first? That would be confusing. Well, one of my statements is wrong. So we'll find out which one. So I am going to get by the first ID, first client ID of 1. Get its name. So 2. So yeah, my variable name should be second. I'll fix that in my slide.
It's all relative. Excuse me?
Comparators. Every collection has a comparator. Sorry, the default is no comparator. The function, it is a function, and what it does is it maintains the collection sort order. So as you add a new model to a collection, it'll be inserted using the comparator into an order because all items in that collection are maintained in order and according to the comparator. Which would be interesting to see what happens when you call a set on the item that is used in the comparator. I guess it would have to put it in reinsert it. That would be an interesting test. So accepts model, and it returns a numeric or string value that is used to identify its placement in order. It returns a value that is compared against other models. So here is just a comparator example. So I create a dog. So here's the simplest way to create a model. I just say backbone model, and I'm not actually creating it here. I'm just pseudo assigning a dog as a model. And so then I have a pound, and so I want to put these in order of age. So end, middle, beginning, and pluck is a function that just pulls out in a list of items by that specific attribute. So beginning, middle, end.
What if you wanted to do a secondary sort order?
I'm assuming that you would take and use your comparator, and I would return age, and then I would return concatenate onto that, like the name.
Okay.
I don't know. That.
Because it would depend if it's treating it as a literal sum.
Yeah,
If one is
that wouldn't really work.
10.
You can't
I don't
return
know.
an array? You said it has to be a string or a number that you return?
According to documentation.
Could you format the age so that it was a string padded with zeros or spaces so that it would sort correctly?
Don't look at that example.
Pay no attention.
It says it's got to be a number or string.
He's probably using heap to auto sort.
But if you formatted the age as a string so that it would sort the way you wanted it to.
That's unacceptable, really. Reset. It's an efficient way to bulk load or clear a collection. So this is a function that's really nice way when you're loading a page and you initially want to inject it with some data, some JSON or something, and you can just inject your collection with some models and you can call reset. And it's just a nice way to do that. What you can also do is you can call reset with no parameters and it'll just wipe out everything in your collection. Okay. Extending the collection. So this is what you would probably do most of the time. You would extend a collection. And so you would take a wolf and you would take a pack. And so when you extend it, there's a property on the collection that's this pack. And you give it a model and you tell it what model you're working with. Okay? And the reason why you do that is because that's what it's said to in the documentation. Okay? So when I run this, okay, so, gosh, that's a really lame example. But the real reason why you want to do that is because when you create, if I were to create a new, if I were to pass something into the collection constructor, object literals, it would take those object literals and it would underneath, it would create wolves for me.
So you wouldn't need the new wolf.
Exactly.
Okay.
Would it complain if you tried to add a pig?
Unless there was some sheep.
I'm gonna go with no. Okay, proxies to _JS for 26 iteration functions. These are awesome. So if you're a fan of like functional programming, these are for you. Okay. And so you can chain these things up and all kinds of cool stuff. So I just have two examples here that are really bad. Okay. So here's one. Here's Marty McFly and Biff Tannen. Okay. And I've got their ages here. And I'm going to send them to the future. And I'm going to do it with this map function. So map is kind of like an iterator over items. And so what I want to do is I want to send them 29 years into the future and see how old they are. And so here they are. I get back a result. And I see that Marty McFly is now 47. So you could do something like this with much simpler code. And of course, I could have put an example together where I simply just called map and didn't have this outer stuff. But this stuff is really powerful when you start using it in combination of other functions like reduce. Here's reduce. And reduce is when you can use reduce for when you have lists of something and you want to sort of kind of collapse the items and lists and build out a new value from all the items in that list. So here's an example of a reduce. So I have this list of dog, cat, human, and I just want the product of all their ages, so I can use a reduce function. And so I seed my reduction with 1, and then for each iteration of the reduction, I pass in the current product as I'm iterating, which would be the result of this, keeps getting passed in as memo. And the current value gets passed in here that I'm iterating over. So I end up with 18. So it's really powerful stuff, and especially nice to see it in JavaScript. So, but that's all I'm going to say about underscore. So now I'm going to talk about Backbone Sync, unless there's questions about collections. Great. Backbone Sync. Backbone Sync is just a function, and its use is it's used to read or save a model to the server. Default, it uses jQuery Zeto Ajax to make a RESTful JSON request. Now, you can override it in order to use a different persistence technology that I'm about to show you in 4 slides. And so what you would probably most likely do is use local storage in your browser. So it looks like this. It's just a function called sync. And it takes the method, a model, and options. So the method is the CRUD method, create, read, update, or delete. The model is the model that you want to save, or the collection that you want to read in. So collections don't get saved. You have to save each model, which I don't know about personally. So then options. There's a successor error callbacks and some jQuery request options. So it has a RESTful approach, and this is how it handles its mapping. You want to create, you post, read, get, update, put, delete, delete. Is that right? I think something's wrong here.
No, that's right.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Backbone sync sends up a request to save a model. Its attributes will be passed, serialized as JSON, and sent in the HTTP body with content type application JSON. There are a couple other options available in Backbone Sync if your server does not support REST, and I'm not going to go over that. So these are the persistent functions available. Notice your model does all the CRUD, the fetch, save, destroy. And I didn't talk about these before, and now's the time to do it. And now, but the collection only has a create and a fetch. And the create is just something I'm not going to talk about, but because I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to talk about it. Okay, so I said I wasn't going to talk.
I'm not asking about that. What's so different? What's on the back end answering those things? Do you have to build that yourself, or is that for a back end?
You've got to build it yourself, which is why I wasn't going to build anything for this. So I'm using local storage. Now, if you just Google Backbone local storage, you find this, backbone.localstorage.js. So that looked pretty cool, and I started using it. And then I'm sure it's wonderful, and the guy who wrote it knows. I'm sure he knows much more than me about this. I'm sure if he ever watches this, he's going to call me an idiot. But I tell you, when I started creating models, I was just getting duplicate models, and it just wasn't working for me. So I found this dude. So this dude, Obstacle, K33G, he has another local storage version. Now, he had a link off the Backbone site, so I don't know if that means it was sponsored, has sponsorship, but I don't really care. So I'm using his library and it's working a little better. It has some problems too, and I'll mention this coming up. So, the problem is me though. I just want to say that. The problem is totally me. I'm not using it right. So, save a model. Let's check this out. So, I am going to create a house. This is the point in the presentation where I got sick of animals. I'm going to create a house. And so all I have to do to use this local storage is I include that file. By including that file, the include is automatically going to override the sync function. Now, I get a store name, which is housedb. And then I create my new house, and then I call save. Save on my house. And I have a success, a callback, and when I do this, I should see my house saved. And I think it saves. It says it saves. So it should be in my browser in local storage. I could show you my local storage in my browser right now, but let's pretend I just don't know how to do that. I just don't know. I don't know where it is. It's some tools, but I don't even see tools. Tools, menus, my menu's gone. So we're just going to have to assume it's there, okay?
How is that the first argument to save, the null?
Great question. Wonderful. Find out. So, save is the first argument. What you can do is you can pass in a list of attributes that you want to be sent to the server. And only those attributes get posted. In this case, I want to send them all. So what better way to send them all than to pass null? Okay? So I'm passing null, and it seems to send them all. And the documentation doesn't really specify this, but it seems to be working okay. A couple forums seem to back me up on this. So let me go try to get that model back out of local storage. So again, here's my house, and I'm going to fetch it. I know my ID was 1. I'm not using client IDs or anything. I'm using an ID I specified. So let me pull it out, fetch it. I found it, thank goodness. Now, let me see if I can get rid of this thing. So I am going to create it. And notice now when I create it, I don't have to go fetch it. I just call it in with an ID. I don't have to give it the attribute name or anything. I just say this is my ID. I call destroy. And it's gone. Now at this point, I don't know how to get to my local storage, but you can trust me that it's not there. Now, because I'm a nice guy, let's go look at local storage. Oh, brother. What a mess.
Did I see something that says orange?
Oh. That'd be a better way. Okay, so let's create this brick house again. There's our brick house. It's kind of cool. And let's try to create it again. Only 1. Thank goodness I'm using the right library. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Let's fetch it out. Nothing's really going to happen. And let's go over here, let's destroy it. It's gone. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. So now here's what happened. I tried to fetch something that wasn't there. So the error callback said, thank God. Okay. Now here's the case. I don't know my ID. So I'm going to call new brick house. And I am going to check to see there's a property called isNew. House is new. And then I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to check isNew again. And I'm going to look at what the client ID was and what is the regular ID. So here we can see it said is new. Yes, it was new. Saving it is new. Now it's not new. My client ID is C79 and it assigned an ID. Now this ID assignment here, I think local storage plugin gave me this ID right here. So here's fetching a collection. I got a house. I have a collection of houses called the ghetto. And I'm going to create 2 new houses called ID1, ID2. And I'm going to save them both, house 1, house 2. And I'm going to fetch them, and I'm going to log them. And there are my houses. Now, you'll notice that I logged it in an error callback. Don't ask me why. It says there's an error, but I got a call back. The error is record not found, so it's something with local storage. If I was seriously using this in an app, I would totally be on this, but for right now, I don't care. You know, I got the views are really cool. I'm gonna try. I got like 4 minutes left. I'm gonna get through these views because this is really important. Okay, so views. It's the way you organize your interface into logical models. And all views are backed by models, okay? But they don't have to be backed by models. One thing I'm going to say about Backbone is that surprised me is that you could take any of these pieces and use them in your app separate from each other. I could use Backbone views without models, and it would help me in some way. You probably wouldn't ever do that, but each of the pieces are kind of independently useful, which is really cool. The models are cool. I could use the models without even using the other parts. The router is cool. Like, I'm not even going to be able to get to the router, but I think that's the coolest feature. Okay, so each view can be updated independently, and we do not want to re-render an entire page for changes. That's the whole point of this. Backbone view. The view has a render function in a view, and it bound to a change event. All those change events on a model, we want a view that listens on those change events, and when a model changes, our view knows how to re-render itself in the DOM. The view does not dictate our HTML or CSS structure, and we can use with any templating library. View. Every view has a property called EL, which is an element within the DOM. Every view has this no matter what. Now, all views do not insert their element into the DOM. You have to insert it into the DOM. You can create a view with an element that's already inserted into the DOM, and then you don't have to worry about insertion. You can create a view from a view's tag name, class name, and ID properties. In this case, it'll create a DOM element with this stuff, but you still have to insert it. If not specified at any of this stuff, a DOM element or these properties, a div will be used by default. You can assign an element to a pre-existing element. Okay, so here's an example of our first view. So my HTML looks like this. I have a slide. I have 2 slides, slide 1 and slide 2. Okay, and so this is my JavaScript for the view. The way you create a view is you extend Backbone view. And here I'm going to give my view a tag name of P. In every view, you want to extend the render function. Now, in the view, every view has the dollar sign. So the dollar sign is just like a normal jQuery selector, except that it is scoped to the specific DOM element of your view. So that's kind of a nice thing. So here, the way you insert, I'm not using any templating here. All I'm saying here on this view is when you render, insert this text, I am a view, into your DOM element. So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a view. I'm going to call it view. I'm creating the instance of a slide view. So up here is kind of a template for a view. I can create as many of these I want and put them into the DOM. So I am going to set the element of the view, this is the DOM element, to slide. And so right here I can pass in a DOM element or I can pass in a selector. And keep in mind over here, in my HTML I have slide 1 and slide 2. So I'm just going to give this slide, the first slide. I want to use that as my container for this view. That's going to be my view element. And so then I'm just calling view render on it. I want to create another view. And this view is going to work a little different. This is demonstrating the two ways of creating views. You can either create the view from a pre-existing DOM element like this one, or you can create a view and insert the DOM element that the view creates for you into the DOM. So right here, I'm calling render on the view, and after the view is rendered, the view has a DOM element that Backbone creates for you using the tag name P. And so then I'm just injecting that view into slide 2. So after I run this, the result is I am a view, I am a view. They are the same things, but the interesting thing here is the first one was just text, I am a view. The second one was in a paragraph tag.
So the tag.
And keep in mind that second one was in a paragraph tag because it let Backbone create its element. And when Backbone created its element right here, Backbone said, hey, what element do you want me to use? And up here we said, I want you to use a paragraph. So that's the simplest way to create a view without using any templating. You give it a render function, and you have to find a way to call render on it. So then events hash. When extending a view, you can declare an events hash for the DOM. Events are written in the format event selector and callback. Omitting the selector causes the event to be bound to the view's root element. Here's an example. So this is the same slide view type deal. Let me just show you the markup first. We only have one slide here, a div with a slide. I'm going to essentially inject the view, use this as my view's element. So this is my view. So ignore that tag name P. So the important thing here to learn on this one is you can take events. This is how you wire up your view to the DOM, eventing. It's very cool. So all you do is you say double click, you give it the DOM event, and you tell it what view function you want to execute. When anybody clicks on the root node of your view, when they double click it, next slide is going to execute. When anybody clicks on this selector, which is going to be when anybody clicks on an anchor tag in your view, delete pres is going to be executed. And right here, when my render function is called, I'm just going to inject an anchor tag into my view. So here is where I actually create the view and put it into the DOM. I create a new instance of the view, and I give it that DOM element that already existed in my HTML. And I call render. So, right here on my view, when I click on the root of the double click, root of my view, I should double click and see next slide execute, which tells me next slide please. And when I click on the anchor, it should tell me what. So let's see it. So I double click here, next slide please. And when I click this, it says what? Now, a model or a collection can be passed into the constructor function of a view. So here's how you do that. I've got a slide model. And I create a new slide. I give it an ID and a title. Nothing is the title. And now here I create a new slide view. So let's say in this case, I want 2 slide views on my screen. And I want them both to show the exact same thing. But I only have one model underneath it. So when that model changes, both slide views should show the same thing. This is what this does. So what I need to do here is, every model has an initialize function. That gets executed when your view is created. When my view is first created, I want to take my model. Every view has a model property. And I want to bind the change event to my render function. So anytime my model changes, my render is going to execute. And then let's look at my render. What am I actually going to render? I'm going to render an input field, a text field. And for the value of my text field, I'm just going to render my model's title into that. And then I'm going to set up an event. And I'm going to say anytime that text field changes, anytime a change occurs on an input field within my view, call the change text function. So my change text function says, okay, take the model, set the title attribute to the value of my input value. So it's taking the value from the text box on the screen and dumping it into my model. And when this happens, a change event will get fired on my model. And so the UI, all UIs that are listening for my model's change event will have their render execute. And so they'll render that view. So down here, I'm creating 2 views. And I'm saying, hey dude, you're going to go in slide 1 that already exists as my HTML is like this. Slide 1, you're going to be here. Slide 2. So this says, alright, go out and use jQuery or whatever and find slide 1 and use that as your element. So your view, your root element is a div. And render everything inside that div. And your model is going to be slide, which is up here. And so view 2, you render inside of slide 2. Your model is slide. You both share the same model. And then, this is a little hokey. You went, to kick off the whole rendering process, I am changing the title to an empty string. Because the title started as nothing. So, your real app would have some bootstrapping process to initially render your view. I don't have that in these. So I am going to set my title to empty string. When that happens, a change event will get fired, and both views will have their render function. So let's see what this looks like. It's a fascinating screen. So I can type DDDD, and once I go off of it, the other one gets updated. And I type this, and when I go off of it, the other one gets updated. So it works because they're both bound to the same thing. So that's how views and models get bound, and that's Backbone kind of at its core. But you would take that up a level and make a really fancy app. There's templating, and of course you wouldn't do something like that in a real app. You would use templating. I can show you templating in like a minute. _JS provides templating, and we just use inserted strings into the DOM. If you use templating, you would basically do something like this. So you could say _template, and you could give it these tokenizers. And I could pass it this, and this just says, hey, man, any input, insert the input name prize into this template. This creates a compiled template. And then I could take my compiled template and pass it an object. And so what it would do is this template knows, hey, anything, if you find a prize, inject the value of prize into this template. So that's kind of the templating. Here's another example of templating, and here's where you can see how ugly it gets. This uses _each, and you say for each people is a list here, people, Mo, Curly, and Larry, and you want to do this function. So you iterate over each and do this templating, and that's so ugly. Like, can you imagine creating views off of this stuff? It's awful. But it would create. That's the HTML it would create. It would create an unordered list. So, and this is the templating. I don't know what this is doing. This is like the same thing.
Can you use jQuery templates or something bigger than that, or is that the only option to do it like that?
Yeah, you can use any templating library you want. And actually, I think jQuery templates are actually deprecated now. But like jQuery templates, you can use _, like this too, which is similar to jQuery templates. And you can put it in a script tag. And I look at this and I still think it sucks.
Yeah.
And it's better, but it's ugly. But you could do this. And so essentially you say a compile template, you pull out that script tag, you take the HTML, and you create a compiled template. And then you inject your people into that compiled template. Now, the problem with this is now you've got to put these script tags in your HTML file or do some other weird thing of putting them in external files on your server and compiling them into JS resources. So your result here is so I'm like stuck. Maybe that's my last slide. That's why I'm stuck. So the coolest part about Backbone is Backbone routing and Backbone history. And so Backbone routing basically lets you set up a router like you would have on any like MVC server side, but on the client. So I can type in a URL, and instead of the web browser trying to go to the server and hit that URL, it's actually going to execute my JavaScript function first. And I can create patterns. And so basically I can control all the routing from my JavaScript. And also I can control all navigation. And with push state in the browser history API, I can change the URL, and I don't even have to use hash bang anymore. Although you're going to have to fall back on that on browsers that don't support it. So I could I could just change the URL to anything I want. And I could push that on the browser's history and push it with state. And with Backbone, it makes it really easy because you can say, hey, this part of my app is editing users. And you can push it, and then you can start navigating to that, and you go forward and backward in your browser, and you really are going through the history in your browser, and it's just like a controller or a router, just like it is on your server. And it's really, really, really cool. Of course, the big problem is that you're going to have to be able to generate all that content back on the server, just like you are on the client in order for search engine optimization. So that's a really big problem. But on some apps it doesn't matter. But it's a really cool thing, and I wish I could show it. But anyway, underscore is really cool, and I hope you guys learned something. And I learned a lot going through this, and I know this Backbone. It's definitely not right for every application. Like, I don't think that this would be suitable for a lot of stuff I work on. It just doesn't need that level of client-side interaction. But for a lot of stuff that is very client-oriented or offline applications, this is awesome. And I you can see how the views stuff could get tedious. Like, there are plugins to do things that like Knockout provides with the model binding right on data attributes. There's like something called like back down or something like that. So it looks really cool. But anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for listening.